Alright, so this Saturday on October 21st, we have UFC Fight Night 118 headlined by Donlad Cowboy Cerrone and Darren Till. And I think it's about time for me to give you guys my predictions for this UFC main card. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Now for this fight card, there's only 4 fights on the main card, and the first of them being a bout between Oskar Piechota and Jonathan Wilson. Now Jonathan Wilson has tremendous power in his hands. He currently has a record of 7-2. 6 of his wins come by knockout. 5 of them were in the first round, and 4 of those come in less than 2 minutes. So he definitely has power. He's a really good boxer, pretty good counterpuncher, but he does have a tendency to gas out because he's a big dude. He's a strong dude. His grappling is okay. His ground game, I haven't seen too much of it. But like I said, his conditioning is a huge question mark coming into this fight. He's had 3 fights in the UFC, but all 3 of those fights have been in the 205-pound division. So he's competed in the light heavyweight division. This is gonna be his middleweight debut. So I'm not sure how his conditioning is gonna fare, considering the fact that now he's dropping an extra 20 pounds. And I mean, you've seen conditioning issues with people who drop too much weight or are a little too big for a certain weight class. I mean, you just saw it with Kevin Lee. He's a big dude for the 155-pound division. He had a horrible weight cut. He looked super drained, and he gassed out in that Tony Ferguson fight and eventually was finished. Now, as for Oskar Piechota, I don't know too much about him, being that this is his UFC debut. I do know that he is from Poland, so this fight is gonna be in his backyard. So I definitely do know that he's gonna have the support of that crowd. I do know that he's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's a very strong grappler. He also possesses power in his hands. He does have knockout power. Currently has a record of 9-0, so he's currently undefeated. 4 of his wins come by knockout, and the other 5 come by submission. So all 9 of his professional fights he's finished. And being that he is much more well-rounded than Jonathan Wilson, I do think he just needs to be patient in this fight. He needs to pick his spots, and most importantly, he needs to avoid any big punches that Jonathan Wilson throws, especially early on, because I do think that if Jonathan Wilson is going to win this fight, he's going to knock him out early. I do see him potentially getting a first-round knockout, but I don't think it's going to go down that way. I think the fight is going to drag on. I think it's going to get into the late second, the late third round, and then that's when, you know, the grappling and ground superiority of Piechota is going to come into play. I think that he does hurt Jonathan Wilson. I'm going to say in the second round, I think he hurts him on the feet. He wobbles him. And then I think Wilson is just going to do attempt a desperate takedown. And I think that Piechota is going to stuff it. And then he's eventually going to... I think he's going to pound him on the ground for a little bit. I think he's going to land a few clean elbows, a few clean punches, soften him up, and then sink into submission. So I do give Piechota the win in the second round via submission. Now, next up on this card, we have a light heavyweight bout between Devin Clark and Jon Blachowicz. Now, Devin Clark currently has a record of 8-1. 3 of those wins come by knockout. He's currently on a 2-fight win streak, has a record of 2-1 in the UFC. And he's a very strong guy, so naturally he does possess power in his punches. His boxing is good. It's not great, but it is good, solid boxing. He can definitely hold his own on the feet, but it's wrestling. It's the grappling aspect where he makes his money. He is a strong grappler. He's a former college wrestler. So I think he is definitely, for sure, going to have the advantage when it comes to the wrestling aspect of the fight game, or of this particular matchup with Jon Blachowicz. But Jon Blachowicz is the better striker. He's a pretty good striker, and experience is what Jon Blachowicz possesses in this type of fight against a younger fighter in Devin Clark, who's only 27 years of age. Albeit he doesn't have the best of records. He has a record of 19-7, but in the UFC he has a record of 2-4. But he hasn't lost to any scrubs. You know, he hasn't been fighting cans. He's fought some top guys. I mean, he has a win over Ilir Latifi. That's a really good win. You know, he stepped inside the octagon with a top contender in Alexander Gustafsson, another top contender in Jimmy Manuwa, who he also lost to, and he's also fought guys like Corey Anderson and Patrick Cummins, another solid fighter in that division. So he definitely does know what it's like to prepare for a talented fighter. Now, I know that he didn't win a majority of those fights. He lost all 4 of those fights to those, you know, ranked opponents. But I mean, just knowing and understanding what it takes to prepare for talented fighters, much more skilled than a guy like Devin Clark. I think that's really going to give him the edge in a fight like this, especially against a young, inexperienced fighter. But Devin Clark is tough. You know, he's no slouch, and I think he is going to give Jon Blachowicz all he can handle. And I think that if Devin Clark is going to win this fight, it's going to be with his wrestling, obviously, because Jan Blachowicz is a way better striker. He's much more well-rounded on the feet, pretty good at Muay Thai, pretty solid kicks, a pretty good striker. So if Devin Clark wants to win this fight, he's going to have to take him down early, and he's going to have to hold him down. He's going to have to beat him up on the ground, and he's going to have to hold him down for 3 rounds. Now, on the feet, obviously, like I've been saying, Jan Blachowicz has the advantage. I think that's where Blachowicz wants the fight, but I just think that Devin Clark is too young. I think he's too strong, and I think he's going to hold him down and get the unanimous decision victory. Now, next up, we have a women's strawweight bout between the former title challenger and current 3rd-ranked strawweight in the world, Karolina Kawalkiewicz, and UFC newcomer Jodie Esquibel. Now, first of all, let's start off with Karolina Kawalkiewicz. Now, she stepped inside the octagon with some of the top women in that division. I mean, she's gotten wins over girls like Rose Namajunas, Ronda Marcos, Heather Jo Clark. 2 of those names are still currently ranked in that division, so she's definitely stepped in there with some top competition. She got her title shot against Joanna Jędrzejczyk, and she was completely outclassed in that fight. Just like a majority of the fights that Joanna Jędrzejczyk is in, she outclasses her opponents. She's just on a completely different level than any other woman in that division. But Karolina did land a clean shot. I remember it was an overhand right, I believe, and I can't remember if it was the 3rd or the 4th round. But she wobbled Joanna bad, and she was in danger. She was hurt badly. Karolina just failed to put her away. So her boxing is good. Her striking is really good. Her Muay Thai and her kickboxing are some of the best in that division. Now, her loss to Joanna back at UFC 205 wasn't her most recent bout. She came back at UFC 212. Where she stepped inside the octagon with another top contender in Claudia Gadelha, and she was absolutely dominated in that fight. Claudia just proved to be way too strong for her, had her way with her, took her to the ground, and eventually finished her off by submission in the 1st round. So with that being said, she's currently on a 2-fight losing streak. She's trying to find her mojo. She's trying to get some confidence back and gain some momentum and push for another title shot. Just so happens to be that in the past 2 fights, she fought better opponents, who exploited her weaknesses. But nevertheless, she's a great fighter. But for her upcoming bout scheduled for this Saturday, she's going up against UFC newcomer Jodie Esquibel. Now, Jodie Esquibel has a boxing background. She was a professional boxer who had a record of 7-7 with 1 draw. In professional boxing, she was a champion. And she definitely has the experience, especially with her hands. She has fast hands. She has pretty decent power in her hands. And her boxing techniques are very sound and very crisp. And don't get it wrong, she does have MMA experience. She's not just a converted boxer. This isn't going to be her first ever mixed martial arts fight. She currently has a record of 6-2, in MMA. She previously competed in Invicta, where she had a record of 4-2. So she does have mixed martial arts experience. She does have MMA experience. Now, for this fight in particular, she's going to have to close the distance. If Jodie Esquibel wants to come in here and take out the number 3 ranked strawweight in the world and completely shock the world, she's going to have to get on the inside. She's going to have to use her 10 years of boxing experience in this fight. Everything she knows, she's going to have to get on the inside. She's going to have to throw a few punches and get out before Karolina can counter. Obviously, I think her chances of winning are going to be in the stand-up aspect. If she can prove that she is the faster fighter and can really display everything that she's learned from her previous boxing track record, I think she can have some success in this fight, because Karolina is hittable. She's proven to be hittable on the feet. But when it's all said and done, Karolina is going to hit back. And I do think that the overall better striker is Karolina. She can box. And I think she's going to be able to keep the distance with her kicks, because she throws solid kicks to the legs and to the head. But one of her strong suits is her Muay Thai. She's excellent in the clinch, and I think that's going to be the difference. She's going to have to engage in the clinch with Jodie Esquibel. She's going to have to throw knees. She's going to have to throw elbows and really hurt Esquibel and make her hesitate in coming on the inside with Karolina. And I just think that Karolina's experience, I think she's the better fighter, and I think she's going to prove it in this fight. I think she's going to box her up for 3 rounds and come away with an easy, dominant, unanimous decision victory. And now for the main event of the evening, we have the number 6 ranked welterweight in the world, Donlad Cowboy Cerrone, going up against a young phenom in Darren the Gorilla Till. Now, this is really going to be an exciting fight, because on one hand, you have a very experienced fighter, one of the more experienced fighters out there, one of the better fighters out there, always comes on to put a performance in Donlad Cowboy Cerrone. His Muay Thai is excellent. He has very strong leg kicks. His boxing is really good. His ground game is extremely underrated. He's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He stepped inside the octagon with some of of the top guys in the 155-pound division, because that's where he competed most of his career, and also in the 175-pound division. I mean, if you look, at his previous fights in the lightweight division, he stepped inside there with Anthony Pettis, Benson Henderson, Rafael Dos Anjos, and once he made the move up to the welterweight division, he's fought some big names, some losses, some wins. Obviously there was that loss to Jorge Masvidal back in January, where Masvidal completely boxed him up, hurt him twice, once at the end of the first and then again in the second, before eventually putting him away via TKO through body shots. And I think that's one thing that hurts Donald Cerrone, is his body. His body is very vulnerable, obviously, with Jorge Masvidal punching him to the body, and the 155-pound fight with Anthony Pettis, where Pettis landed a clean kick to the liver of Donald Cerrone and hurt him badly, and that's what put him away. So he does have some questions when it comes to being able to take punches and kicks, knees to the body. But I mean, there's been very few people, especially people that are inexperienced, to be able to exploit that in Donald Cerrone, because he's so skilled and just one of the crowd favorites. Now, in his recent fight back at UFC 214, it was a very close fight between Cowboy and Robbie Lawler. It was a good fight, an extremely competitive and close fight. Now, I do think that Donald Cerrone did win that fight, but I'm not upset about it. I'm not going to sit here and complain about the decision and say, oh, Donald Cerrone was robbed in that fight, because it was very close. It could have gone either way. I just think that the fight should have gone to Cerrone. I think Cerrone did enough to win that fight, but nevertheless, it was a good fight. But the performance from Cowboy doesn't matter. What matters is what goes on the record, and because he lost that fight via unanimous decision to Robbie Lawler, he's now with a 2-fight losing streak. So he's looking to get back into the win column and continue his climb up the rankings. And in his way is a young talent in Darren Till. Currently has a record of 15-0, is currently undefeated, and the UFC has a record of 3-0 with one draw to Nicholas Darby, which was a very close fight. I believe that fight received Fight of the Night honors. He's a very good striker, excellent Muay Thai, throws elbows on the ground and on the feet, really hard body kicks, really hard leg kicks, a very unorthodox style, likes to fight with his hands down, excellent movement. He kind of just bounces back and forth, and he looks very fluent on the feet, very similar to Conor McGregor, and he likes to throw the counter left hand exactly like Conor McGregor does. He does have power in his hands, well, more so his left hand, but he's very accurate with his punches. And like I said earlier, he is a master in Muay Thai, very strong Muay Thai, just like Donald Cerrone. Now, the only thing he lacks, obviously, is experience. He doesn't have nearly the same amount of experience in Cowboy. He hasn't even been in one main event, or he hasn't even participated in one main event fight, meaning that he hasn't gone 5 rounds. Cowboy has gone 5 rounds, or has participated in 5-round fights multiple times in his career. And with that being said, Cowboy is known to have one of the best gas tanks, not just in the welterweight division, but in the entire UFC. He is in extremely good shape, and from what I've seen in some of Darren Till's past fights, I think he's in pretty good shape. I mean, in his last fight with Bojan Velickovic, he did go the distance. He didn't really show any signs or display any signs of gassing out. He was very active in that fight. The only issue I have with Darren Till is that he leans heavy on his front leg, and he doesn't check those leg kicks. Velickovic was able to land some clean left leg kicks, even though it seemed as if it didn't really hurt Darren Till. But I'm telling you, if he leaves that front leg or that lead leg open for Donald Cerrone to attack and to chop up, Cerrone's going to take advantage of that, because he knows in what area of the fight against certain opponents that he has the best advantage or the best opportunity to win. And I think with Darren Till, he's just going to have to be patient, because Darren Till comes out strong early. I think he's going to have to let Darren Till pressure, even though Darren Till is a natural counterpuncher. Cerrone is going to have to be patient in this fight and let Till be the aggressor. He's going to have to time his punches and make Till hesitate and make him think twice about coming in and swinging on him. Now, I really want to give Darren Till the advantage in this fight, because he is the younger, the faster fighter, and I believe that he is hungrier than Donald Cerrone at this stage in his career, being that Cerrone is a seasoned veteran. I mean, Darren Till is only 24 years of age. Cerrone is 10 years older than him. He's 34, and he's taken beatings. He's taken beatings throughout his career, so I do think that there is a legitimate chance of Darren Till going in there and hurting him early and putting him away early. Now, I know that Donald Cerrone has a really good chin. As I mentioned earlier, it's his body where he has trouble with, that has trouble taking any sort of punishment. So I can definitely see why Darren Till is heavily picked in this fight. You know, I've seen some other MMA channels picking Darren Till, and I think it's a bit surprising to me. It is really surprising to me. Not necessarily because Darren Till doesn't have, I'm not saying that Darren Till doesn't have a shot in this fight. He does, he really does. But Cerrone thrives in these kinds of fights where people are writing him off and where people think that the young buck is just going to come in, you know, and cruise to an easy victory. You know, Cerrone steps up. He's very game. He's always game to put on a performance. And he is extremely well-rounded, and I think some people forget that if this fight goes to the ground, it's Cerrone's to take. Cerrone has the clear advantage on the mat. He is the way better grappler, the way better wrestler, and he is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So although Cerrone likes to bang, although he likes to stand in the center of the octagon and exchange punches and go toe-to-toe, I think that he needs to be smart in this fight, and I think he is going to be smart in this fight. I can see him standing around or standing on the feet for a couple minutes of the first round, feeling it out, you know, seeing how aggressive and how fast Till is coming out. And on one of the times that Till kind of jumps forward and either feints or throws a punch, I can see Cerrone shooting for a takedown and getting this fight down to the mat and being able to make something happen on the ground. I think that he has a legitimate shot of being able to submit Darren Till, and this is a very tough fight to pick because on one hand you have the experience, and I wouldn't say that Donald Cerrone is washed up at this point in his career, because in the fight with Robbie Lawler, he was still a very close fight. So I'm not concerned about his most recent performance. What does concern me was that performance against Jorge Masvidal, who is a big welterweight, and he's a really good boxer with strong power in his hands. And you saw how his ability to cut off the octagon really gave Donald Cerrone trouble. And Darren Till is a big boy himself. I believe he walks around at about 205, 208 pounds or so, I've read. So he is a big dude, and he is much stronger than Donald Cerrone. He's much faster, much more athletic, much more explosive. I mean, like I've been saying, this is a tough fight to pick. I've been sitting here and I've been weighing the strengths and weaknesses of both fighters, you know, and I'm not sure if I really want to pick Darren Till. He's fought nobodies in that division, and this is a huge step up in competition. Now, you've seen other guys, you know, take these leaps, you know, not having that much experience and fighting some of these top guys. I mean, you saw it with Kevin Lee and Tony Ferguson. He bit off much more than he can chew with that fight. You saw it with Jason Knight and Ricardo Lamas, where Ricardo Lamas completely annihilated Jason Knight inside one round. I mean, you also saw it with Yair Rodriguez and Frankie Edgar. Now, the difference between Frankie Edgar, Ricardo Lamas, Tony Ferguson, and Donald Cerrone is that the other three that I mentioned, right, Edgar, Lamas, and Ferguson, are still at the top of their game. They still have much more left in the tank. I mean, Ricardo Lamas is ranked inside the top 4. Frankie Edgar is getting a title shot against Max Holloway, and Tony Ferguson is the interim lightweight champion. Now, Cerrone is falling down the rankings, obviously, with these past 2 losses. I think he doesn't have much more to give. He's not in his prime, obviously, being 34 years old. So I think that's what's the difference. Now, like I've been saying, he does hold the experience advantage, but I just think that Darren Till is going to be too explosive, and I think he's going to come in hungry, and he wants to make a name for himself. He wants to win, and he wants to be a world champion. So I think that his hunger and his drive, his determination is what's going to motivate him, you know, much more in this fight, obviously, than any of his other fights. So I think he's going to come in. I think he's going to hurt Cerrone early on, and unfortunately, I do see Darren Till putting away Donald Cerrone in the first round via TKO. Now, if you like these predictions, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, leave your comments down below. Make sure to let me know who you think is going to win in this upcoming UFC fight card, and make sure to stay tuned for more content.